Sup, homie?
Yo, what up?
How's it going?
Living the dream, man. Living the dream. By the time this comes out, ideally I will be in Wisconsin, hanging out, kicking it at the
Nice,
Dells, water
nice.
parks, and hopefully it stops raining a little bit for Father's Day. You know what I mean? Father's Day's coming up, dude. You excited?
Father's Day is coming up. Yeah, my wife asked me what I wanted for Father's Day. I honestly didn't know what to tell her. I don't know. What should
Well,
I
it's a
what
great,
sh
it's a
what
great
should we get?
story. It's a
What should we
great
get for
story,
Father's
and
Day?
it's a great story, and nobody tells it like you do. I think, man, I'm a big book fan, dude.
Yeah,
I like getting books.
yeah.
Unfortunately, there's probably a few books that my wife could get me because you and I tend to just buy them and read them. But I think we were talking about the idea of just giving a book list of books that we've read that were impactful for us, specifically with Father's Day coming up. Not only as gift ideas, very short turnaround from, I guess this will be Friday and Father's Day is on
Hey
Sunday,
man, you
but
can get it quick on Amazon. Quick.
quick on, dude, you get next day, get next
Yeah,
day easy, especially around Father's Day. Um, but I think, we have a list of different books and they've impacted us in different ways. Um, and I think you and I have different reading habits as well, but I find myself running through books with the dad filter often. And
yeah,
how can this apply to me? And because fatherhood is such a big priority in my life, any kind of book that is self-help or whatever, or a resource is something that inevitably I run through a filter of as being a dad. How can this apply? Right.
yeah, yeah. We've mentioned this before on podcasts when we've done specifically like reading lists or whatever, and I'm pretty much a nonfiction only reader, and I have yet to kind of dive into the world of fiction. And I know you keep on telling me to do so, and others have done the same. And I just I don't know. I enjoy reading the nonfiction, and I have a long list, and we have podcast guests that come on that have written books, and so I tend to read those before our guests come on, and um, so I have a list. They're all nonfiction of books that, that I've read recently. But one thing that I would say that um, I go into a book with is intending on coming out of a book with action steps. Like no kidding, in that book there are probably some little nuggets of information, things that I take away with, and then I go and do it. Like I put it into action, right? One I heard so I can't remember who said it, but he said if you're going into a nonfiction book to read, like go into it with a pen, right? So like if it's a book that I own, man, I have a pen with me and I'm underlining, starring, circling, tabbing, taking notes. Oftentimes I'll have a notebook by it and I'll write down notes and go back through it and come up with, no kidding, stuff that I'm going to put and implement after reading this book. And so quite a few of these books that I intend on listing off on this podcast are books that have impacted me in a way that I'm now going and like changing how I do things, right? I don't know. Do you get that same type of thing from some of the fiction books that you've read?
Yeah, man. The thing with fiction that I think that benefits everybody is it's a different part of the brain,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think reading necessarily, for me, always results in um doesn't always result in like a checklist of things to make me better. Like maybe there are things. Fiction opens up avenues of thought of things you wouldn't have thought about.
Yeah.
Like a great example, one of my books, there's a series of books called I don't know what the series, but it's William Forstchen, and I've mentioned this before, but it's like the 1 second after. Well, there's a series, right? It's like 1 second after, one day, 1 year, and I think the last book is 5 years after. And it it's about it's an attack on the United States, right? And it's all this stuff happens and chaos ensues. And it's not something I would normally think about. But from that book, there were thoughts about like, well, what would I like? How do I? How am I preparing my family? And not for like the end of the world necessarily, but even that line of thought takes me to places like, well, things that are extremely important to me, like eternity and my faith. Like, how am I preparing my kids for things? Like, am I a forward thinker, or am I just going from activity to activity to just get, you to soccer, you to football, like let's get dinner on the table. Okay, what's for breakfast tomorrow? Like what time? Like, I think we get in the ruts of those things, and we don't think about things like, hey, what am I doing every single day? A book like this puts my mind in the future. Well, what if something crazy happened? Okay, well, and you start moving more. I start moving more towards, well, at some point, no matter what it looks like, I'm going to die. It's almost assured. It's like 99% assured. My children are going to die. Like all these things are going to happen. Like, what do I think big picture like that? Do I think how I'm preparing my family? What are the most important things? And when you read a novel like that, all the important things that you think are important go away, right? Like they don't have
Yeah.
cell phones, they don't have cars, they don't have, like, they're down to like, this is my community. And so like even that, like even thinking about community, that kind of book gets me thinking about like, hey, what am I doing in my community? Like what kind of relationships am I fostering? Because a lot of these books deal with human nature.
Mm.
Like that's what they're really about, right? Whether they're nonfiction or fiction, the fiction books put you in a place where you can think of things that are not necessarily your reality and open your mind to some different ideas. And and a lot of times it could be really fun, right? It's just, these page turners, and they're fun books. But it helps your creativity, and also creativity, right? Like we're in the summertime right now. One of the big challenges that I have, how am I creative to keep my kids busy in the summer as a good dad who wants to be extremely present and make something memorable?
Mm.
That's a different part of the mind,
Yeah.
right? It's a different part of the mind. And so I think as we go through these books, to answer your question directly, I think they're all very important with the filter you put on. Like I've recently applied a different filter to some of the books that we're reading, like specifically Family Revision and The World Needs a Father. I'll tell you one thing that came from those books. I've started to realize how selfish I am
Mm.
and how much I pursue the things that are important to me. And what does that impact on my family? And that's opened a lot of different, like recently, last couple of weeks, I'm like really challenging my thoughts on these self-help books, not on the self-help books themselves, but is self-help the best thing you can be doing? Or should you be reading, or should you be applying a filter, family help books? Like, how can I be a servant to help others grow, not just self help myself? Because I think one of the biggest issues we're facing societally is that we are so focused on ourselves and helping ourselves. It has a very direct impact, especially in the Western family.
Yeah, both of those books are on my reading list, and both of the authors are coming on our podcast. One of the things that Cassie Carson said, who will be coming up next week, is value yourself, right? But love others. Value is very different than love. Like love is serving, like serving others, and I definitely think that that's something that you know men need to hear, dads, husbands need to hear is how can we value ourselves? How do we put an importance on our health, our mental health, our spiritual health, our physical health, things that we need to allow us to drive to move forward to be better men. But how do we show up and love others and serve others? I think those are very different. So those are two books at the top of my list for dads. For Father's Day reading list is The World Needs a Father. Fantastic book that I think every man should read. And then Family Revision by Jeremy Pryor. How do you show up differently and like look at it from the lens of leading your family, not just yourself? I think those are really two powerful books.
Yeah, man. And I'll add a couple that were fun, but also just they got my mind going differently. I obviously mentioned the 5 years after, but that whole series I think is a great series.
Who's the
And
author of
then
that?
that guy's name is William Forstchen. Forstchen, I think that's how you say his name. Forstchen. Forstchen.
Nice.
Uh, and then I read Doc recently. It's about Doc Holliday.
Oh,
It
nice.
was kind of cool because it's like a historical fiction by Mary, what's her name? Mary Russell, I think is her name, Mary Doria Russell. And that book was, again, it was a fascinating read, but it just opened conversation with my kids because Doc Holliday, he died out here in Colorado, and we just happened to go after I read it. No plan to this, but we happened to go to Glenwood Springs,
Hmm.
which was where a lot of folks that were suffering tuberculosis went to a sanatorium that used to be open there, and that's where he died. Like that's where his grave is.
I did not
And,
know that.
and so, but again, even, there's a that enriched my experience, that enriched the conversation with my kids in a way that, like, I mean, I guess I could have read an autobiography or something of Doc, but it wasn't my attraction wasn't to the historical relevance of Doc Holliday. It was just, I think I watched Tombstone a few nights before or something. I don't know what it was,
Yeah.
but it just was fascinating to me. So I love historical fictions, and then I also I mentioned this in the past, but I think Lonesome Dove was just a fascinating read. Not only the book itself, but just the storytelling and the creativity and some just really good conversations with it. And it's funny how these things happen. My kids are interested in like history and Buffalo, and so it opened context for some of those conversations as well, because we have the armories by our house where there's buffalo wandering around, and it's just fascinating to dive into some of these things, and fun, right? And you can invite your kids into, it's also modeling as a dad, modeling reading. Are you modeling reading, or are you modeling YouTube? Like what do
Yeah.
you value? What are you spending your time doing? So I think that there's some really important aspects of that. And I want to go back to the self-help thing. I think I never thought this is a thought that I this conversation is prompting, but it really has me challenging again. Where do we spend our time, and what are we reading? What's the intent? How many books are you going to spend focused on yourself? Right. And what is it? What is the impact of that? Again, a question I just throw out there as we explore what you and I believe to be one of the greatest mechanisms to grow your mind, to grow yourself, is through reading books. Um, do you analyze where you're spending time? Right? What kind of books are you reading? Are they worthwhile? And are they making you a better dad, specifically with Father's Day coming up? Are these books enriching your life and your kids' lives as a result? And how are you challenging yourself to show up? Right? How are you challenging yourself to be better? I would love to implement this, and it's like a idealistic maybe, but I would love to have like a reading hour in my family.
Mm. Yeah.
Like we all just grab a book, we sit on the couch together, and we just read for an hour. Like I think that would be amazing. But do I truly value that? Right? Is that something that I really want to? Someone talked about reading the Bible to their kids every morning, just reading. He's like, it's crazy, it's chaotic, it's chaotic. I don't even know if any of this is sticking, but he just reads the Bible every morning to his kids for over breakfast. Like things like this, right? How do we challenge ourselves to be present, and the mechanisms through which we're trying to teach our family and ourselves? Do we value them highly? Which to me, reading is one of those things.
Yeah, for sure, man. Two books that I think about a lot and reference back a lot on, again, kind of the fiction side of things, or I'm sorry, the nonfiction side of things, kind of to-do items, action items, and both of these books are specifically for dads. Dad Tired by Jared Lopes, we had him on our podcast, and then Dad Voted by Kevin Goodnight, also on our podcast, I think twice now. Just books on how to show up better as a dad. And there's fantastic stories in both of them. There's fantastic action items, things that you can do to implement into your family to show up differently and show up and be present as a father. So two books that I have again read a couple times now, gone back to. And implemented some of these action steps in both these books, and I know you have too. Um, two other two other books that came to mind for me were um, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and then Of Boys and Men by Russell Reeves. We had Russell on, or we had him on our podcast a few weeks ago, just talking about kind of the challenges that men are facing right now in this world. And then the
Richard,
anxious
right?
Richard,
Richard.
yeah, I'm sorry, Richard Reeves. Yep.
Yep.
Um, and then the Anxious Generation, just an eye-opening book that again I think all fathers should read from the perspective of like how we're allowing our children to be plugged in or maybe not plugged in, how we are leading the family in that, and how we're responsible for ourselves and how we're modeling that for our children.
Yeah, buddy. Amen. I think that's a pretty solid. There's got to be at least a couple books in there that I think are solid gift ideas, and I would encourage you guys just to, again, just be super intentional with what you're putting in, and not only that, but how can you action it? I think that's a great filter you talked about at the beginning, right? Is what are the things that I can do with this? And even if it's just one, right? That 1% better idea. If it's just one thing that makes me 1% better from this book, whether it's, more creative or a conversation starter or no kidding, here's some tactics. Here's how to be a better dad. All these different things. How can I serve better? If you can pull something out that drives towards action, a bias towards action from these books that we're reading, I think it's a great place to be. So it's a good book. There's a good list. There's a couple that
Good
you've
list.
read that I've not read. I know anything that's fiction that I've read, you have not read, and
That's
so
right.
I'd encourage you to dive in.
Yeah, I mean, Lonesome Dove. I remember watching that series when I was younger. Like, it's fantastic, fantastic
Yeah,
story.
I never saw the show or the
Mm,
movie or whatever it is, but yeah, the book was, yeah, it was fat, dude. It had me locked in. It was
yeah,
fascinating. It impacted my sleep directly.
nice, nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, we'll put the list of books in the show notes. And happy Father's Day. Go read some
Happy
books.
Father's Day.
Go take action. Go be a better dad. Read some books.
Giddy up.
See ya.
See ya.